years, because they can have a deep sense of inadequacy during that process. You know, they're having to learn things and having to get the foundation before they can move on to the next stage. And it's important that they get a great deal of encouragement in that process, and that they're helped at finding that solid foundation. Otherwise, you can set a pattern of inferiority and uncertainty for the rest of their life. The suspicion that patterns are not solid. We also know that the 1-3 is the basic incarnation cross. In other words, it's common. And its commonality is that we need a strong foundation. You know, if you look at the way the 1-3 is, you'll see that basically we're designed very much like, sort of like, don't get carried away, a pyramid. In other words, that the base is much wider. And it's actually more like an hourglass. But again, I don't want to get into a whole number, but because the 4-1 makes it an hourglass. And it looks a lot like the two juxtaposition symbols, you know, except instead of a diamond, you know, they look like the letter 8, because that's basically the way it works. But anyway, that base, that bottom base in the hexagram, that's wide. And it's wide so that we have an exploration of the foundation, and out of that, the possibility that if the foundation is found to be faulty, we can adapt out of that third line underneath. She's got an anarchist underneath. And underneath that first line, need to find things out, is a deep potential pessimism that is there as part of the third line experience. Now again, remember what we've discussed about pessimism, that it's very important for people who carry the third line in their profile specifically to recognize that being able to understand or make sense of or know what doesn't work is not a handicap, but an advantage. And then the pessimism really has value. In other words, the 1-3 needs to know what works and what doesn't work. What works, they can stay with for the rest of the process, and you have a solid foundation. What doesn't work, you tear the thing down and you build a new foundation. It's the 1-3 combination. So what you know about somebody like this, when you meet a 1-3, what you know right away is that if they're not comfortable in their life, at the unconscious level, they're deeply pessimistic that it's not going to get any better, and you know that there's a part of them that would like to tear everything down around them in order to be able to escape that. Thing is that the 1-3 never knows where to go. Remember that the third line anarchist does not have a vision of what can replace what doesn't work. I don't know. That's not their job. Their job is that if they recognize it doesn't work, then they tear it.